Welcome back to the Brewer Fanatic podcast. I'm Spencer Michaelis, and you might notice if you're watching on YouTube, Jack is not with us again today. Um, I've got Ryan Topp filling in. Thank you again, Ryan, especially late notice this time. Jack and I, not the greatest planning on our part this week. So thank you for filling in. And how you doing today?
Pretty good. Lots of weirdness with the schedule on this one. This is a night getaway day game deal. And I really did think, I'm like, oh, they're trying to get the Angels back because there was that story in the Athletic back from like April about how the Angels play all these getaway day games at like ridiculous times at the last possible minute. And I went and looked, and last year the Brewers played a 6:38 getaway day game, which would have been, I'm sure, the latest possible minute they could have started under the CBA at the Angels. And then somebody pointed out to me that no, today was supposed to be that DJ Diesel concert, the Shack as a DJ concert, and it got canceled. So that's why this game was being played at night on a getaway day, which, I mean, it is the first time all year they've done this. They did have the last homestand, the one with the Giants, or no, it wasn't the Giants, it was the Phillies. They played a 3:10 game on getaway day. So a little bit later than normal, but that's still, that's still really an afternoon game at that point, just a slightly later one. But yeah, I really did think I had something there that I'm like, oh no, shoot, no. My conspiracy theory fell apart in my face. It was fun while it lasted, though. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I completely forgot about the DJ Diesel concert that was supposed to happen. So that does make a lot of sense. Yeah, unfortunate we're not getting blessed by the DJing ability of Shaquille O'Neal after this game, but hopefully the Brewers can pull it out. We are recording in the middle of the game, so I think we'll probably know what happens by the time we even maybe get to discussing that portion of the series. So we might cover it, we might not. I'm not 100% sure, but if we do, it'll probably be kind of bare bones. But we'll be talking about the Cardinals series and then at least these first two games of the Angels series. So I think we can jump right on into it with that Cardinals series, and the Brewers end up taking 2 of 3 in this one. Game 1, the Brewers take 8-2. Quinn Priester was on the mound. Another solid outing from him. I don't think he had his best stuff. I think he went out there and he just kind of got the job done, which again, we've talked about on the show before. That's something he's become really good at over the course of the season, just finding a way to perform at a solid or better level. And then when he really has it going, it can reach a different level. But in this one, he went 5 1/3. He gave up 5 hits. He only walked 1 to 5 strikeouts, ended up giving up 2 earned runs. The Brewers jumped on the board in an interesting fashion. In the third inning, they scored 4 runs without recording a hit. So it started with a Jake Bauers walk and then a Caleb Durbin walk. Joey Ortiz tried to sack bunt them over. An error on the pitcher pulled Wilson Contreras off of the base, allowing Ortiz to reach and load the bases. They originally ruled that a hit, and they changed it to just a sack bunt and an E1. Sal Frelick drew a bases loaded walk. Jackson Chourio hit a sac fly, and on the throw home, the throw hit Caleb Durbin's helmet. From second, Sal Frelick moved to third, and then Bryce Turang hit a ground ball that scored Frelick. So they recorded 4 runs, and they did not have a single hit on the board. I think that is about if you were going to describe a Brewers-esque inning this season, I think that's it to a T. Like if you were going to, if someone wanted to make the point that the Brewers have been lucky, I think that's the one I'd go to right away if I were the person trying to make that point. But again, this is kind of what the Brewers do. They drew walks. They were patient. They were willing to bunt and try and put some action out there on the field, and they made something happen with that. And then just the way things break, you get a bounce off the helmet, and then you have another guy on third, and you drive him in by putting the ball in play. So while they didn't really do a lot offensively in this inning, I think it also showed how they make this work throughout, how they have made this work throughout the season, and kind of the ways this can work from time to time. But then they were able to add some more legitimate runs to the board. Jake Bauers hit a solo homer following a really good road trip up with another home run in his first game back in Milwaukee. And then Christian Yelich hit a 2-run homer as well, and Jackson Chourio would have an RBI single later in the game to win that game 8-2. I wouldn't say anything super exciting in that one, but a really nice, clean win against a team that they should be able to beat when they play them in, under the right circumstances. You're not going to win every game, but this is not a great Cardinals team. Game 2 ended up being a much more exciting and a much closer game, and a very impressive comeback for the Brewers in this one. They take this one 9-8 in 10 innings. Jacob Mizorowski gets the start. Interesting start for him because Jack and I have talked about it a number of times. Normally, when he gets beat, it's not going to be because he gave up a bunch of hits. And in this one, he did give up 7 hits over his 5 innings. The Cardinals seem to be jumping on some of his stuff early, and he only walked 1. He did strike out 4, and then he gave up the 4 earned runs, 2 of which did come via the homer. But again, 7 hits in 5 innings is a higher number than you'd expect from Miz. And the national broadcast was even talking about that a little bit. Like, this isn't really how you'd expect him to get beat. You'd maybe expect some walks around the homers or hit by pitches or whatever. But in this case, the Cardinals did a good job. They kind of jumped on some of his stuff and put the ball in play. And for all the things we have said about the Cardinals this year, they are still pretty good in terms of, as an organization, they don't strike out a ton. They don't whiff a ton. So I guess it's not super shocking, but it gave a little bit of a blueprint as to how a team can maybe get some more hits off of Miz and push some runs across that way. Either way, Ryan, just watching that one, there's been a lot of Miz talk about playoff rotation, everything else. I think the Brewers have kind of started to tip their hand in terms of the playoff rotation, and we do have some questions regarding pitching later, so we won't go too in depth here. But just watching Miz in that one, kind of what were your thoughts, and do you think the Cardinals showed something that might be something other teams try and emulate in that game or anything like that?
Well, I think he was really putting the ball in the middle of the zone. There were a lot of the RBIs, 3 of the 4 RBIs came, including the home runs there, came on balls that were center cut. He had the velocity. I think one of them, though, was a slider, but 2 of them were like 100-mile-an-hour fastballs, 100-plus-mile-an-hour fastballs, and guys jumped on them. And they were also, we're talking about guys jumping on first pitches. 2 of the 3 were also first pitch swings. So I think the Cardinals did show something there that you can kind of get to Miz that way on days when I think his command was almost just like too good for his own good in that day. I speculated on this on the other podcast about the idea that, like, I think some of the way that, like, Miz is being handled and probably should be handled at this point is you're just kind of setting up in the middle of the zone and letting his own action take it where it's going to take it. And, like, so just give him a target and let him throw, because the natural movement on all his pitches is going to take care of a lot of that. Well, I think in that game, he was actually just hitting his spots. He was getting too much of the plate. And I know at one point that he had, like, thrown, it was something like 55 or 45 of 55 pitches were strikes, which is very un-Miz-like. That's not him filling up the zone. It's not normally how it goes. And I think that was really the problem here. But I do sort of wonder about, and obviously I think in that first series, there's no way that Miz is going to be starting, because you only need to run 3 starters out there. And I think the priority is obviously the other 3 ahead of him. But did you say we have a question coming up about that? Is that right? So we just wait on that.
It's kind of related. It's more just about the pitchers who will make the roster. So it's nothing.
Oh, okay.
We can talk about it if you'd like to.
Okay, yeah. So I think that there's a temptation to put Miz in the bullpen because people are like, oh, well, the stuff could play up. Well, yeah, I mean, how much is it really going to play up in the bullpen versus what it is normally? Maybe a little bit. Maybe it does play up a little bit. That could definitely be the case. But part of me also says that I like the idea of Miz coming in the beginning of a game, where if you do get bad Miz, then there's time to make up for it. You can come back like they did in this game. This actual game is a pretty good example of that. They were able to come back because they had this time to be able to do it. I do worry about putting Miz in the 6th or 7th inning of a game you're leading by 1 run and saying, yeah, go hold that lead for us, because Miz is still at the point where he can get himself in trouble fairly quickly, and then you're going to have a hard time adjusting, especially with the 3-batter rule. Murph is going to have to stick with him for 3 batters at least. So I do kind of wonder if that's really the best place for him. I think that starting at least gives that flexibility and gives the chance where if you do get bad Miz, you can recover from it. But we'll see. It's not going to be an easy decision. And like I said, it's not relevant for the first round, presumably anyway. By the way, we do have breaking news here. The Cubs have lost. So the magic number as of this moment is now down to 5, and the Brewers just tied the game up. So things are looking up right now for the game, for it to get to 4 by the time people listen to this, hopefully.
Yeah, in terms of Miz, like Jack and I talked about it a couple episodes ago, and just the starting part of it's hard to move him. You can't just move him to the bullpen either. I think that's kind of the thought process here, is like, oh, just put him in the bullpen. Like it changes the routine. It changes so many things. And we talked about that, so I won't go in depth on it, but like it's a lot. It's a big change to go to the bullpen. I think if you see him in a shorter role, it'll be as an opener type. And maybe that is for a Priester, even in a 3-game series. If they think that's the best way to go, I'd be a little surprised if they did it, or in a 5-game series, I mean, but, or either one, but hopefully 5. Hopefully, if they do use him in that series, I think it would be in an opener role. And I think it would be for a Priester, somebody who's been used to it. Now, the issue there is like, what are you really opening for at that point? Because normally you're trying to hide him against lefties by using a lefty. So I don't know that there's really a ton of great logic there, but I could see it. I think there would be at least some sort of reasoning that you could do that. But again, I'm with you. I don't think you just move him to the pen. Even like, it wouldn't completely shock me if he was off the NLDS roster. And then if they advance, he's on the NLCS roster. Like, I could see that working out that way, just because they don't know exactly what role he would have in the DS. And then they would have a more clear one if they feel like they need 4 starters in the CS. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it goes, but I'm with you. I think a big part of this game in particular was he was just not just in the zone, but too good in the zone. And no matter how good your stuff is, hitters will eventually start to kind of square it up if you're leaving it right down the middle. And if they know there's no threat of like having to chase, like a lot of times with Miz, you have to have that in the back of your head that, oh, I don't want to be chasing here because he's a little all over the place. Effectively Wild is it's a good podcast, and it's a real thing that is a real thing that pitchers have to deal with. So yeah, I'm with you. I agree with everything you said there. I think it's more just something where he was a little too good with the command, really just control, I would say, being in the zone so much. But anyway, after he leaves the game, the Brewers are heading into the bottom of the 6th inning. They're trailing 6-1. The one run they had on the board at that point was a Sal Frelick sac fly. William Contreras added a sac fly of his own in the 6th, and then he added another one in the 8th, and that made it 6-3. So he drove in 2 runs in a row via the sac fly. Yelich added an RBI ground out to make it 6-4. The Cardinals came back and scored 1 run in the top of the 9th against Tobias Myers to make it 7-4. And then in the bottom of the 9th, Caleb Durbin and Monasterio end up getting hit by pitches each. Monasterio's was on ball 4, but he still got hit, so it's a hit by pitch. Sal Frelick lines an RBI double into left center, so it's 2nd and 3rd, tying run on 2nd, nobody out. Jackson Churio hits an RBI single up the middle. Great play by, I believe, Brendan Donovan was at 2nd to save the tying run from scoring on that play. Bryce Terang flew out to shallow left, and then William Contreras had an RBI infield hit. The slowest player to have as many infield hits as he has. I don't know that that's a real stat. It's just something I'm assuming. But he seems to get a ton of them, and I don't understand it, but I guess part of it is probably that third basemen are usually pretty far back against somebody who can hit the ball as hard as Contreras. And if he squibs one out down the third base line and he's running, he's not slow for a catcher for sure. So either way, that ends up tying the game. It goes to the 10th. Abner Uribe pitches in this one, and it had been a while since he pitched in a game, a full week, I believe, at this point. And he looked rusty. He definitely looked like someone who had maybe not touched the game mound for a little bit. He worked around a hit by pitch and a walk, and he only ended up allowing the Manfred men to score. They kind of mentioned on the broadcast something that had kind of been whispered a little bit as well. that Uribe has been dealing with an undisclosed issue, is how they worded it. And I'm guessing that's part of the reason we have not seen him nearly as much. And frankly, I think the rest was going to be good for him either way. I don't think that was a bad thing. I think it would be good to get him some rest, even if he was feeling completely fine right now. But given he's dealing with something, we don't exactly know what that is. The extended break makes sense. I think it obviously wasn't great for him in this outing. But more than anything, you need Abner Uribe to be healthy when you get to the playoffs. And I think this is a way to at least hopefully help with whatever he's dealing with. And he was able to work through it and end up only scoring the one unearned run via the runner placed on second to start the inning. But looking forward, I mean, these last couple of weeks, Ryan, do you see this as an opportunity to maybe keep easing off the gas with him as you hopefully, like you mentioned, hopefully that magic number just keeps falling down a little bit, and he might be one of those guys that they can be a little more careful with as they get down the stretch, especially with, we'll talk about later, Trevor McGill's recent news and some other stuff happening in the bullpen. Like, you really do not want to be without Uribe. So is this a case where you think they still get him work to make sure that he's fine and he's ready for the playoffs, but maybe they already probably worked him too much, so it's hard to say lessen the load like just a little. I think it'd be a big difference from what we're used to seeing this year, but should they really pull back the reins, I guess, on him here and kind of take it easy on him heading into the end of the season if he is dealing with something?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's really no downside to it. And because with them moving sort of inextricably here towards clinching the bye and the division, I think, yeah, this gives you the flexibility to do that, and to have him on something like a regular rest pattern where he's getting 2 to 3 days off in between appearances and then just being used like that. He looked good in this last outing that we saw on Wednesday night. Things looked good again for him. It was a little shakier on Saturday night, obviously, but he looked good on Wednesday. And so, yeah, giving him that extra time makes a lot of sense. And frankly, letting a bunch of different guys sort of see what you've got with these different guys. We're going to talk more about some other guys in a minute here, but yeah, just seeing what you've got from all these guys makes a lot of sense right now. Don't push anybody harder than you absolutely need to. And at this point, you really don't need to push anybody. So just back off. I was very happy with how Murph handled, especially the first two nights of the Angel series in terms of the bullpen. I thought he did a great job in terms of mixing it up and getting guys in there and getting work for guys, even though some of those games were close at various points.
Yeah, agreed. After Uribe was able to escape that inning with no further damage, the Brewers came back up to the plate. Caleb Durbin hits an RBI double to left center to tie the game, and then Andrew Monasterio with a very, very impressive 10-pitch at-bat, fouled off a bunch of pitches and lines one into right center for the win. We've talked about Monasterio on this pod a few times this year. He was somebody that coming into the year I kind of honestly was writing off a little bit. I mean, I liked him a couple years ago, but it was always kind of like, yeah, I mean, he's a fine, bench player. It's fine if he's on the roster. His 2024 was not very good, either offensively or defensively. I thought he took steps back in a lot of ways. And this year he has, completely reversed that back to being just a really positive player as a bench player. And tip my cap to him. He seems to have just a great attitude every single day he's there. You can tell he cares about winning. He wants to do whatever it takes to help the team. Kind of the perfect bench guy that you want to have, especially as kind of that. He's probably bordering on like being the 26th man right now, maybe a little bit higher just because of Ortiz's struggles. And we do have a question about those two later, so I won't go too far into that either. But yeah, just a really cool moment for Monasterio and a really impressive at bat to win the game. And yeah, I think he's going to be playing in the playoffs. I don't know what the role exactly will be, but I anticipate him having an at bat or getting a chance in the field at some point in the playoff series where he probably will, have to impact a game in a good way. And I think he's capable of it. But Ryan, what have you seen from Monasterio this year and just kind of what he's brought to the team?
Yeah, I think it's just sort of an all-around skill set. Nothing he does is great or outstanding, but there's just sort of an overall competence to all of it where he's capable at second base, third base, passable at shortstop. I'll say he's a passable shortstop. He
Yeah.
just has physical
Yep.
limitations there that are going to make it harder for him. But and then at the plate, he has been really, really good at fitting right in with this team concept of what they do, which is great swing decisions, and just he makes pitchers throw him pitches that are in the strike zone, and then when he gets them, he's been hitting a lot of them pretty hard, which has been a sort of a difference from what we're used to with him. That's not necessarily what we've generally seen from him in the past. So it's been really, really nice. But this is what happens with bench guys in sort of limited roles. Sometimes they pop up and surprise you for a few months and are capable of doing this. And that's why you give guys chances. And I think the reason, as you already alluded to, the reason he's earned these chances is because from everything we've heard, and we've heard it a lot from a lot of different people, including I believe Jack has talked about this, that he is just the kind of guy who shows up every day and is ready to go. And despite maybe not playing for long extended stretches of time, he's there doing his preparation in a position to help the team when he gets called on. And that sort of a player having the ability to do that off the bench is really underrated. I think it's a very, very underrated thing, and it's not something that all
Yeah.
guys are capable of doing. It takes a certain sort of someone to be able to pull that off, and he seems to have figured it out, and credit to him. Kind of reminds me of Hernan Perez in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably better plate discipline than Aaron, but pretty much everyone has better plate discipline than Aaron, so I'm not going to give him too much credit for that.
Sure. Which is the general
It
idea,
is,
right?
yeah, no, I mean, but Aaron, yeah, and Aaron played a role on that 2018 team. He played big games in the playoffs for that team, and I think that's something that we could end up seeing from Monasterio this year. But absolutely, just been a really key piece to this team to make things click, and I think that's something that definitely needs to be acknowledged. Game 3 for the Brewers did not end up going their way a little bit. After a really hot start to the series offensively, they just couldn't quite get the bats going. In Game 3, Quintana on the bump in this one. He only ends up going 4 innings. He allowed 4 hits, 2 walks. He struck out 2. He gave up 3 earned runs. And after the game, we find out that he was dealing with a calf issue. We weren't 100% sure exactly what that was. And I don't know that we still are 100% sure exactly what the calf issue is specifically, but we know he has one. Either way, I'll get to it in a second. They've made a move before Game 2 of the series that kind of foreshadowed where they're going to be going, I think, in the playoffs. And it's kind of I think it was already heading this way, but we'll get to it in a second. In this one, though, the Brewers' 2 runs come via a Caleb Durbin homer and a Danny Jansen homer. Danny Jansen's first home run as a Brewer, something that I think Jack and I both thought he might bring to the table in terms of some added power. And funny enough, the team itself has hit for a lot more power since they acquired Danny Jansen, but he has not been part of the power equation for them. But he did add one here. Hopefully, something where he can get going a little bit. At least having the threat of it when he's in the lineup would be nice. And potentially something happens to Contreras, you obviously are going to need him to step in and perform. So good to see something positive from him offensively. And then the other positive in this game came from the bullpen. Aaron Ashby, Grant Anderson, Chad Patrick, Jared Koenig, and Yoel Payamps go 5 scoreless after Quintana and strike out 10 in those 5 innings. And I mentioned earlier, the Cardinals are not a team that strikes out a lot. So impressive work from really probably only one of the A pen guys in Ashby, and then, and Koenig, I suppose. But Anderson's kind of in that B group, I think. And then we're going to talk about Patrick in a second, because there might be something a little bit different here in the bullpen too that might be worth discussing. But yeah, this was a really nice outing from the pen. Obviously, the Brewers offense just couldn't quite put it together and pull out the win, but a good outing from a lot of guys who maybe aren't in the top tier of the pen. The Angels series, moving on to that one, we are still in the middle of that game. So again, we'll probably revisit it if we get back to game 3 at some point here. But in game 1, the Brewers take this one 9-2. Freddie Peralta had a really strong start in this one. He went 6 innings. He only allowed 2 hits. He also only walked 2 to 10 strikeouts. He gave up 1 run via solo home run. Homer 29 homers on the season, getting really close to that 30 homer mark that he hasn't hit since 2019. Been a very, very strong season from Christian Yelich. Just really, really nice to see, especially just coming off of the back issue a few weeks ago, him hitting for power, getting back into that, showing that he can still do that. He did it. He's done it multiple times so far on this homestand. Just really, really good to see from him. Andrew Vaughn, who also has very quickly heated back up, had an RBI double, and Jackson Churio had an RBI single, and then Contreras had a 2-run single to provide insurance for the bullpen. And I see the Brewers just took the lead as we are recording in game 3, it appears. So 3-2 lead for those who are scoring along at home in, retrospect, because it's not going to make any sense that we're commentating the game right now, but but we are paying attention to it, and the Brewers are up 3-2, so you can clock that and you can keep track of where we are in the night if you like to. But I think the thing we want to talk about, and we should talk about in this game, is who I mentioned, Chad Patrick, again pitching in this one. Throws a perfect inning, striking out the side. And Kurt Hogue pointed it out. It's been pretty obvious just at first glance, just watching him in the bullpen, but the velocity out of the bullpen has been up almost like 2 miles per hour on average across his pitches. If you're watching on YouTube, I kind of pulled up his Baseball Savant pitcher breakdown from his last outing here, and you can see like the cutter velo is up 1.5 miles per hour on average. The four seam is up 1.6, sinker up 1.7, changeup not really. You don't really want that one up ideally, but also up 1 mile per hour, and then the slider is up a couple ticks as well. But it's all playing very well in this shorter roll. This looks like something that he can legitimately help the Brewers with, and I think this is a role that he might be able to, given the injuries, given what we're seeing from the bullpen right now. Like I would not be surprised if he's actually in the bullpen, like not just as a long man, but as somebody that they might be willing to go to in a normal game. And I think part of what we've seen from Patrick all season is that even when things weren't going well for him, he always had a pretty good ability to limit damage. Didn't ever feel like the moment was getting too big for him or that he was letting things spiral on him. And that's a really, really good quality to have as a reliever and somebody who would potentially be pitching in the postseason as well. Like you get the opportunity to go out there and you're going to be in a big spot almost anytime you enter a playoff game. And there could be a blowout in either direction that he comes in, and maybe that's what ends up happening. But I like to reference Nick Mears coming in game 3 last year. I don't think Pat Murphy wanted Nick Mears to be pitching in that spot, given what he had been doing as a Brewer since being acquired. But that was kind of the option that they had at that point, was Nick Mears. And you can run into that type of situation in the playoffs when you might be giving a quick hook to starters a couple times, and guys just have to get used in spots. And Patrick's showing that he might be someone that you could trust and put out there in that type of role, and he could get the job done. So, Ryan, I guess what are your thoughts just on bullpen Chad Patrick to this point, and do you think this is something we could see in the playoffs?
Yeah, it certainly is intriguing, right? Like we look at this and go, the fact that stuff is playing up, and honestly, I wouldn't have expected that. I would not expect it. There's certain guys that I think of as guys who their stuff could potentially play up out of the bullpen and they would be throwing harder, and I'm not sure quite why I didn't think that would be the case with Chad Patrick, but I didn't think that would be the case with Chad Patrick. And yet here we are. And I think that you're 100% right that if the way things work now especially in the playoffs, is teams are trying to keep their pitchers out there for short. They definitely don't want guys being seen 2 and 3 times through the order unless they're really going well. Right? Like teams want to limit, unless you're talking about a real stud starting pitcher, you don't really want them to do that third time through the order, and sometimes not even really a second time through the order. You just kind of want to get them through the bare minimum there, and then kind of turn it over to a succession of relievers. And it's looking like Chad Patrick could be a guy who would play up as a guy in a succession of relievers. So that is very intriguing. And what we need to see, first off, we already did see it. I didn't realize that he had pitched on back-to-back days there, but he pitched on Sunday and then he pitched again on Monday. That would be thing one that you'd want to see, is how does he handle coming out? And the fact that he did so well, struck out the side, perfect inning in that second appearance, that tells me a lot too, that, okay, this is a guy that we could potentially turn to, it's say game 3 and game 4 of a series on back-to-back days, and not really worry about there being a huge problem, because you worry about that sometimes with starters, right? That they wouldn't be able to bounce back, and that coming back on, with no days off would be an issue. So that's thing one. And you'd just like to see him get more and more chances to keep doing it, right? Like you'd like to see Murphy continue to use him in these situations and see how it goes. Like, go ahead and turn it over and see how it goes. We'll see. We maybe could see it right here. The Brewers are now up 5-2 in the bottom of the 7th. Maybe we'll see Chad Patrick here. Who knows? Abner Uribe was just warming though for the top of the 8th. So who knows? But it's definitely, like I said, it's intriguing.
Yeah. I think it was back-to-back games, but the Brewers had the weird Monday off day. So it was actually, there was a day off in between. But either way, like I do think that's something, you're right. I would like to see him do that at some point during the remaining 2 weeks of the season here. Because I do think that's important. That's something that you need to know a guy can do before you head into the playoffs. So it's definitely worthwhile to make sure that's something he can actually do. But yeah, I mean, the stuff looks good. And like I said, I do think a big part of it for me is that just the stuff was actually my only real concern when he started, was the stuff. He did a lot of good things as a pitcher. Like he has good moxie. He has a good presence on the mound. He doesn't let things spiral. He doesn't ever really show a bunch of negative emotion. But the stuff wasn't always quite up to par with what you would hope to see from a big league pitcher, and seeing it play up in a relief role, just, it gives me more confidence in him. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see which direction they go. But this was an interesting thing that I wasn't really expecting to see heading into the end of this season here. And now it's something where I see it as like a legitimate opportunity for the Brewers to have somebody who can help in the bullpen. And that's a credit to Chad Patrick. So good work from him. Before game 2, we did end up getting the Quintana news. So it was a very interesting timeline of events, because in the afternoon, most of the beat reporters had talked to Quintana, and he mentioned like things felt pretty good when he had kind of been testing some stuff. And no less than like an hour later, he was placed on the IL. So it was an interesting timeline. I don't really know what happened there. Maybe it stiffened up on him as he kind of, was sitting there after he was done for a while, and they realized that, okay, it is a bigger problem than we thought. Maybe they just got to the point where they were like, it's not worth pushing through for the end of the regular season. But I think the interesting thing here is that this takes him out for the rest of the regular season. And for me personally, he was not a guy I was really expecting to see on a playoff roster. I shouldn't say expecting. I wasn't wanting to see him on the playoff roster, but I was actually kind of expecting to see him on the playoff roster, because Pat Murphy has just constantly praised him and shown so much trust and faith in him. I kind of expected him to make it, and this makes it a lot less likely even than what I think it already was, with him being out for the rest of the regular season. Now he's going to be coming off the IL in the playoffs. That feels like a tough ask for anybody, and probably not worth it for a guy who's your 5th best starter, and that might be kind of generous in terms of some of the depth they have at starter as well. So yeah, this kind of, for me, I think it might make it a little easier for the Brewers to make decisions in the playoffs. But if they really do want to bring him back, that'll become a very interesting problem to have when they get to that point. I guess, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think this is somebody that they're going to bring back, or do you think that was the last pitch we will see Quintana throw as a Brewer this year?
Yeah, I'm pretty much down the line with you on agreeing that I was hoping he wouldn't be on the postseason roster, and this does make that more likely. So I have a lot of respect for what he does. I think that he's a tremendous pitcher. And
Yeah.
I mentioned on the other podcast, you saw the Jonathan Judge piece. They were talking about which pitchers in the big leagues throw the most in hitters' weak zones. So who is attacking hitters' weak zones the best? And because there's always that tension with pitching where it's like, well, do you want a pitcher to just do what he does really, really well and to play to his strengths, or do you want him to attack hitter weaknesses? And trying to find that balance can be tricky sometimes, right? And so finding out that Quintana was actually in 2024 the pitcher who pitched the most to hitter weaknesses was really something, and it really tells you a lot about what is making him work with very diminished, very limited stuff at this point, but all kinds of veteran moxie and guile. He's attacking hitters where they're weakest and executing a game plan, right? Like he is the master of executing a game plan. But in the postseason, it's one thing to do that against the Pittsburgh Pirates of the world, especially when they're playing out the string for a season. It's another thing to do it against a playoff lineup, and we're going to see nothing but real good lineups here in the postseason. There isn't a bad lineup that you're going to potentially face, and so that's asking a different thing. And I do really value his contributions in the regular season. Him eating innings for this team this year, especially early in the season when they had a lot of problems getting guys to even get out there on the mound, was so huge for keeping this team in play and keeping the train on the tracks, as it were. But in terms of a guy that I want facing good lineups in the playoffs, no. So I think from that perspective, this is, addition by subtraction, which I like I said, I feel bad about saying it that way, but I mean, you understand the point that he's just limited in what he can do at this point.
Yeah.
And good lineups isn't something I'm real eager to see him do in games that really, really matter.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I think the main point there, and that was the research and the time that went into the Jonathan Judge article there, is incredibly impressive stuff. Like, it was very, very fun to read. And you are right. It was very easily, like, the first thing that jumps out is Quintana's at the top and like all of these metrics in terms of not throwing pitches where hitters want them to be thrown and throwing them in their weak spots. And that's part of why Jack and I've talked about it a lot this year. Like, he pitches around to a degree. Like, he's basically pitching around the zone because he knows if he's in the zone, it needs to be in these spots that they do not perform well against. And if it's out of the zone, they can't do anything to it. They're not going to do damage against stuff out of the zone. I might walk some guys, but I'll also probably get some double plays and erase them that way. Like you said, very, very smart guy. Incredibly, it's very impressive how he's extended his career. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Gio Gonzalez, although I would say Gio had a little bit more like swing and miss stuff even at the end of his career. But you're right. Like, when you get to the playoffs, not only can hitters hit mistakes, but they can also hit pitchers' pitches, especially if the pitcher's pitch is not actually a very good pitch. Like, if the stuff is not great on that pitch and he's locating it well, the best teams and the best hitters are still going to be able to do damage on it. That's not going to be the case quite as often for guys who have a little bit better stuff. Even if they make a little bit more of a mistake, you can kind of get away with it. And there's been research done on that as well, where slower fastballs get hit more even if they're low and away versus a fastball that's kind of middle but thrown 100. Like, it's just kind of the way it is. Like, this has been researched. This is something that is proven out over the course of time, especially in the StatCast era, where it's easier to judge even the quality of contact. And yeah, the guys like Quintana, they do a really good job and they help you get through 162. And he did a ton to help this team do that. And I think just vet wise, he was a really good guy to have around the pitching staff and teach some of the younger guys how to do some of the stuff that he does. But yeah, it's a different animal in the playoffs. And I'm not sure he's the fit for that type of baseball at this point in his career. But hopefully he can be around the team with his injury. Still, again, have that veteran leadership in the clubhouse, in the dugout. Yeah, I think that's probably the way I'm anticipating it going, kind of hoping it'll end up going here. But the move after Quintana was placed on the IL was activating Nick Mears to take his spot on the 26 man. He, again, coming off of his back injury or back soreness. He would end up appearing in game 2, and we'll get to that in a second. But in this one, the Brewers also, once again, win 9-2, both games to start the series, 9-2 victories. Brandon Woodruff in this one, he had not pitched in 11 days. They kind of skipped the start. I think they're getting to the point where we talked about with the rebate, like, let's be careful with Woodruff. Let's make sure he's ready for the playoffs, but also let's be careful. This is a guy coming off a major injury who's getting up there in innings now overall, especially combined with his AAA rehab innings. They're going to be smart with him. And they were smart with him in this game as well, because he went 5 innings of 1 earned run, only 2 hits allowed, one of them being a solo homer, no walks and 9 strikeouts, only 69 pitches, and he still ends up being pulled after 5. Just, again, that was planned. This was always the plan in this one. They're going to be careful with him, but a great outing from him, 17 whiffs, a 44% whiff rate. Really impressive stuff. And the thing about it is that he came out and the velocity was way down in the first inning, and he's been starting games slow velo wise. Like it doesn't tend to tick up until the second inning, but this was lower than any other game that I can recall. It actually reminded me a little bit more of like watching his AAA rehab outings in the beginning. He'd kind of sit in the upper 80s and then he'd get up to 91, 92, maybe 93 later in the game. That's what this one reminded me of, and definitely concerning. And Ryan, I know you kind of messaged the group chat right away in the first, like, oh boy, what, let's keep an eye on this, see if it starts to climb up as the game progresses. And it did. I mean, it got up and it kind of sat in that 92 range for the rest of the start. And Jack and I have talked about it a lot. Like, if he's in that 92, 93 range, it can play fine. Like he can play just fine from that. It helps that he has the cutter now, which he used quite a bit in this outing. But yeah, I mean, after the game, he kind of mentioned that he thought he had lost a little bit of his mechanics early on, just because it had been so long since he'd been in a game that he got a little outside of what he was trying to do. But you never know how true that is, or if it's just kind of a way for him to kind of talk about it in a way that maybe makes him feel a little bit better, saying like, yeah, my mechanics were a little off. That's why the velo was down. It's not something I'm super concerned about, but if it becomes a trend, that does get a little concerning. And the only reason being is that I think once he settles in, he'll be fine, but I would be a little concerned about that first inning against a good team. If the velo's down, this is a guy who has struggled a bit with homers in his return, and not surprisingly, that's kind of the way his current stuff plays. There's going to be some home run involved in the profile, but that would give me slight concern. Not enough for me to say, no, Brandon Woodruff's not a starter in the playoffs. Like, he's absolutely a starter, but it'll just be something that I will be watching when you get into a playoff series, because I just don't know that he'd be able to get away with it. The other part of the equation here, there's probably a little more adrenaline going in the playoffs at that point too. So it wouldn't shock me to actually see a bit of the opposite for him, where he is actually up a little bit early on in the game because he's got that adrenaline pumping. And Woodruff's always kind of been a guy who steps up in the moment and kind of has a little extra in the tank when the moment calls for it. So definitely wouldn't surprise me if it leaned that way, but just something I definitely think is worth keeping an eye on as we head into the playoffs. Ryan, were your fears kind of alleviated as he started to climb a little bit in velocity as the start went on yesterday?
Yeah, somewhat. He looked like he was laboring at points, which you would expect, and they are being careful with him. They probably could have gone deeper, and that would have been fine. I did want to jump on something you said there, because this idea that maybe we're a little concerned about what he might look like in the first. That screams to me potentially giving him a soft landing with an opener. If you get him, instead of having to face the top of one of these brutal lineups, maybe get him in the second inning where he's facing more of the bottom of that lineup. That could potentially be advantageous for him, I think, possibly. I don't know if they would actually do it, if that would be a thing he would be okay with. I mean, we've seen him come in not to start a playoff game before, sort of famously, and then take over. That is a thing that has happened in the past, but that was a long time ago, and he was a rookie, or yeah, I think he was a rookie back then. But it's a thought, maybe, that you could do this. I don't know if that would be a thing he would be interested in doing, but it's a potential thought. But yes, Woodruff it's going to be a fascinating conversation. I was just having it this afternoon with a friend of mine because he was wondering what the outlook was for keeping Woodruff for next year. We were talking about qualifying offers and all of that, and I honestly don't know, because I think so much of this comes down to how healthy he really is, and I think they're being very careful with him, and that's good. But I don't know how careful you can actually be with a guy. Um, you know, how careful can you be going forward? You could do some things to avoid some problems, especially like in the postseason when you have all these days off and all that sort of stuff. You can do more, but like long term, I do wonder what the health outlook is, and it'd be fascinating to know what they know as opposed to just what we see publicly. But yeah, maybe an opener for Brandon Woodruff would be a thing to consider, but I sort of doubt it's going to go that way.
Yeah, I'd be surprised, but I definitely don't hate the thought. I think it would make some sense, but I just think, and you kind of hinted at it, like he's such a vet at this point. Would Murph feel comfortable even kind of going out there and saying like, "Hey, Woodruff, or Woody, we don't really feel comfortable with you going out and facing the top of the order with the lower velo." Like, I just don't think that's something they would actually do. But I think logically it would make plenty of sense. I just don't expect it to be something they would go that direction with. But moving on to the rest of this game, the Brewers offense just kind of really it was like three big swings in this game. Bases loaded, Blake Perkins hits a 2-run single to left. Sal Frelick with a really nice 9-pitch at bat that ends in a 3-run home run. Later in the game, in the 8th inning, Blake Perkins comes up again with the bases loaded and hits a 3-run triple. And then the only non-Woodruff run allowed was a Nick Mears solo home run against Nick Mears. In his return, I kind of mentioned his first game back. The only thing I'll say on this, and you can jump in if you'd like, but like I was hoping to maybe see the velo tick up back up a little bit after the back injury and after being on the IL, and hoping maybe that was related to some of the velocity creeping down, and it did not. It was pretty much exactly where it's been, sitting in the like upper 95 range in terms of velo, and it's just tough. Like he's been very good numbers wise this year, but he's a tough guy for me to trust when the velocity's in the mid 90s and the fastball's getting hit as hard as it has this year. They are working the curveball back in, which I like. I think that's something that can at least keep hitters a little more honest, to not be able to guess fastball versus slider. At least they have one other thing to worry about. But yeah, not exactly great to see for me him come back with the same velocity. Ryan, I don't know if you have any Mears thoughts that you want to get out there.
Yeah, I think for me, he's a guy that in the postseason, I want to see him facing the bottom of orders as opposed to the top of orders. I think that's a thing I want to follow more this year and really, really kind of hone in on it. There are certain guys that I want to see facing the good hitters. And I think with this team, that's Uribe when he's right. We should talk about that because he came in and he didn't look as good as he just got out of that inning without allowing a run, but he didn't look as good, and the velocity seemed to be a bit down from what I was seeing on the TV there. But Uribe would still be one of those guys. Ashby would be one of those guys. I guess Koenig would be one of those guys if it's lefties, not if it's righty power hitters, but if it's lefties, I could be okay with him seeing lefties. I think Grant Anderson and Mears, those fall more into, I'm okay seeing them in leverage, but I really prefer it was against the bottom of the lineup and not the other team's best hitters, right? Like those are guys they're probably gonna have to pitch some in leverage, and maybe somebody like Perkins could grow into that, or Myers. We haven't really talked much about Myers, but Myers, I was hoping could maybe be that guy. And it looked like it was maybe trending that way for a while, that maybe Murph was going to give him that chance. And then he's sort of gotten lost in the shuffle lately himself. So I don't know. It's very hard to figure out exactly who, and who knows with McGill what exactly. I'm definitely going to want to see him show something. I want to see it. I want to see what it looks like, what his velocity looks like, what his command looks like, because I definitely want to see it before the postseason before I would trust him in a high leverage situation, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're talking about there with him facing the bottom, they actually used him where they did in this game to set up the next pitcher to face the bottom of the order. And that was Erick Fedde, who ended up going 2 perfect innings. He struck out 2 as well. And he was very, very heavy on the cutter and slider usage, or sweeper, I should say. And I think that's something that definitely has changed a bit since he came over. And if you're watching on YouTube, I've got the graphic up here on his pitch percentage by month. But since he came to the Brewers, and this is a kind of a change from what the Brewers normally do, his sinker usage has gone down quite a bit, over 10%, which they're normally kind of sinker you, as I would like to call them, and they love going to the sinker for anybody. But the other thing they like to do is throw the cutter more, and they have kind of changed the cutter usage, not a ton, but it's up about 5%. The sweeper usage is up as well. And those are the 2 main pitches now. At no point this year has the sinker not been the primary pitch until September. So he's gone to this cutter and sweeper usage, and righties especially have been really, really struggling against Fedde since he came to the Brewers. With this change in usage, I'm going to see if I can pull it up. I know Dom Catronio had it tweeted out earlier today, the numbers against righties. But this change, I mean, it seems to be working pretty well. And for somebody who last season was a pretty highly regarded trade deadline acquisition by the Cardinals, somebody who was showing a lot of improvement last year, he shows an ability to spin the ball. He's got the multiple fastball look that the Brewers like. In my mind, when they picked him up, it was more or less just, hey, we're picking up an arm to eat some innings for that Braves series, especially when he first appeared in the game and started a game. But at this point, I think they like him. I think they view him as a guy who they might feel comfortable. They want to see how he finishes the season, but I would not be shocked if he's somebody that they're looking at as like, hey, he could be kind of one of the long guys in the bullpen during a playoff series, with righty so far being 1 for 18 against him, especially with this sweeper usage up. Like, could he be a guy that you try and sneak through the bottom of the order for an inning, maybe a little bit longer, by throwing a bunch of sweepers and a bunch of cutters and just making it work? And like, so far it's been really good. And I don't know that I buy it. I don't know that I'm fully sold on it yet or anything like that, but it's been pretty good. And you can kind of see the formula that they're trying to work with and how it can work. And the other part of this is that the changeup usage is also up a little bit from where it was earlier in the season. And I'm guessing that's slightly tied to how he's trying to get some lefties out. I haven't looked at the splits on the pitch usage, but my guess would be that's kind of his counter to lefties. But so far, it's been really good against righties. They've made a clear change in his pitch repertoire. And like, yeah, I'm not saying he's earned a spot on the playoff roster right now, but I could see him doing so over the last couple of weeks here if he continues to get righties out. And like I said, this is a guy who has talent and a guy who I think the Brewers were probably interested in acquiring last trade deadline. He's their type, and he was having a really good season with the White Sox. It would not have shocked me if they were involved in those trade discussions. Obviously, he ended up in St. Louis, and things didn't go very well for him there, but it's been pretty good. Ryan, do you think this is just kind of a small sample, nothing, or do you think maybe some of these changes are legitimate and maybe he is somebody who could help this team moving forward even into October?
So I think he could help the team moving forward, but more next year than like in October. The reason I say that is I don't know that I'm going to feel comfortable that I could see enough to really have confidence that this is going to be a real quantitative change in what he's capable of doing in the amount of limited amount of time that we have left. It's one thing if you're looking more at like pure stuff and saying, okay, yeah, like we see with Chad Patrick, like, yeah, the stuff seems to be playing up like this. This is more about like pitch mix and that sort of thing. And I think it's absolutely real, and I'm intrigued by it. And I think we have a pretty good sense that the Brewers were interested in Erick Fedde coming back from, where was he, Japan? And then when he was traded last year, like there was interest from the Milwaukee Brewers in Erick Fedde. I think this has been a guy this organization has been after for a while here. But there's a couple circumstantial things that make me wonder. One, yeah, I'm going to have trouble trusting it in a playoff situation and in playoffs where I'm really putting a high value on big time stuff to get guys out. I'm going to have trouble trusting it. And the other factor is, especially in that first series, having a guy capable of eating innings just isn't really a thing when you're playing a game, have a day off, play a game, have a day off, play 2 back-to-back games, and then have a day off. And then if you have to still play, the 5th game, obviously, then you have that off day. I mean, this series is a 5-game series, and it's going to be played from Saturday to Saturday. It's kind of like NBA first round series, the way that those work, where you just get all this extra time off to fit it in multiple weekends. It's kind of like that. And so from that perspective, I just don't, I feel like I would rather have, I don't know, Brandon Lockridge on the roster so that he could potentially pinch run in a big situation. I think that has more utility probably than having Erick Fedde to be a guy who could like eat innings for you, because frankly, in these games, you're just going to have your relievers pitching basically. Like, I think they have enough relievers to get through it anyway, and you're already going to be cutting the rotation probably short by 2 pitchers for this series. So you're looking at like a 3-man rotation. And I mean, as much as, do they really need a 10-man bullpen to get through that series? I think you could probably cut it down to, maybe an 11-man pitching staff or a 12-man pitching staff, get a couple extra position players in there. And I think that's going to be a better way to get through that first series. So I'm intrigued by it, but it's more of a 2026 thing than it is a 2025 thing for me.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I think that's definitely something that my guess would be they're definitely interested in keeping him around moving forward at this point. And especially if they think they can get a deal and bring him back and maybe make him a starter next year, as the rotation will be a little bit more in question. You got some injuries, you've got younger guys. You don't know if Woodruff's back. You don't know if you don't know if Freddie's back. Like, there's going to be things that are kind of up in the air going into the offseason. So yeah, I could definitely see him being back, but I think that's probably correct. I'm just curious if they will get to a point where they maybe feel confident enough to keep him around. But I think, honestly, the more I think about it, it'd probably take more injuries, and we obviously don't want that. Speaking of guys who we weren't sure if they would be helping in 2026 or maybe the end of this year, Robert Gasser, he threw another 2 2/3 innings scoreless on Wednesday for Nashville. And prior to game 2, the one we just discussed, Pat Murphy said, I think you'll see him soon. So this part is interesting to me, and you can jump in or not. I didn't prep you for this at all, but like, they activated Gasser after what was technically 43 days on his rehab, because you can get up to 3 different 10-day extensions beyond the 30 days for somebody who's coming off Tommy John. Now they've had him down. As of today, they've had him down long enough where he will burn an option year by staying down. I'm confused by the entire process from the Brewers on this, because they could have extended it 17 more days and then had no risk at losing this option year. And in an ideal world, it doesn't matter. Robert Gasser is a starter for you the next few years. He still has 2 option years left after this year either way. But to me, this just feels like a rare, like, random misstep from the Brewers in terms of like, why activate him when they did option him and then lose the option year for no real good reason. Like, I can't come up with a reason why they would do that makes any sense to me. Like, I just don't get what the thought process was on that one. And it's a weird one. I mean, I would guess if they were asked about it, they'd have some sort of logic behind the move. And maybe I'm misreading or misunderstanding how the extensions work on the Tommy John thing. And maybe that's where I'm getting confused. But to me, it seems like they could have kept him on the IL for 17 more days, which would have taken him far enough into September where even just keeping him option the rest of the year wouldn't have ever burned the option. And again, do I think it's going to matter? Probably not in the future, but it's just one of those weird things where they're so good at this stuff that it surprises me that there seems to have been something that like they kind of screwed up here. And I just was really surprised looking into it. Like, I don't know what the logic was behind any of it. Why wasn't he up for this last outing? If you wanted to, save the option year, you could have just brought him up. He's been doing well in AAA. Sounds like he's going to be up very soon, but you kept him down just long enough to burn the option year. Like, it's just a really weird timeline to me, something that I just don't see from the Brewers ever. And it's just interesting to me, but I don't know if you have thoughts on that, Ryan. Like I said, I didn't really warn you I was going to bring that up, but do you have any thoughts on that? Is there anything you can come up with after hearing that makes any sense for you?
Yeah, so what I do wonder is it was right around the time that they got to the end of that and optioned him down that they had fully extended him out to 90. Was it 90 pitches? If I'm remembering correctly, the timeline of this correctly, that was around the time they'd gotten him fully extended out to 90 pitches, because that was then when they said, okay, we're actually going to shorten him up now, right? Like, we're going to see if he can bounce back a little bit quicker, because we think we're more likely to use him out of the bullpen. And they started that sort of right after that point. What I wonder is if MLB really watches this sort of thing closely, especially because when you're dealing with option years and that's like player freedom, that's a player freedom issue, right? And so I wonder if they watch it real closely and they basically said, hey, you've got him up to the innings, or you've got him up to the pitch count that you would want at this point. You've built him up slowly and got him all the way back. It's time to poop or get off the pot, basically. And that's pure speculation on my part. I have absolutely no actual knowledge of that, but I do wonder if MLB watches that and says, like, okay, it's time. You've had your extensions, but now you're at the point where you need to make a decision, because he has been extended, or he has been stretched out to the point that it would max out for a starter, right? So, because I think that's the point of something like that, is to allow for a guy to be stretched out and to be slowly built back up. And they probably got to the end of that. That would be my guess, because it does seem like an unforced error, doesn't it? It seems uncharacteristic for what they normally do. And so I would guess that this could be just like the way MLB watches those extensions probably played a role here, but at least a decent chance.
That's a really good call. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. If you get to the point where he's clearly stretched out, he could come back to the big leagues if they wanted him to right now, and they're going to say, hey, now this is where we have to cut it off. You don't get another extension. It ends right here. That would make a lot of sense to me. So that's probably what it is, in all honesty. I think that would make sense. Still, I guess the only other thing I'd question then is, like, okay, he was that close to coming back and you still could have saved that year. Why not just activate him at some point here this week? But maybe they're at the point where they don't think, that's worth it, that they thought they had enough guys that they like and want to give opportunities to. My argument would be Yoel Payamp still has a spot. But that is the only argument I would have at this point. So, but yeah, I mean, and this is tremendous timing, because the Brewers did just finish off this game, I believe. So we're heading into game 3 here, and the Brewers, unless I'm reading this wrong. Yep, there we go. There's a final out. Yep, they just ended up winning game 3, 5-2. I'll just be going right through the box score to update on this one, but obviously another Priester start and a tremendous start to this start. I'm using the word start a lot, but beginning to this start from Priester. He ends up going 5 2/3. He allowed 3 hits. He walked 2. He did strike out 10, and he ended up giving up 2 earned runs. They came on a 2-run homer, but he was perfect heading into the 5th inning. He had not allowed a single base runner, and he had struck out 9 at that point. So really, really good start for him. Obviously, a 2-run homer in the 5th inning ends up kind of breaking up a lot of the really, really good vibes around the start, but still 5 2/3, 2 earned runs with 10 strikeouts to only 2 walks is a great, great start from Priester. Again, Aaron Ashby ended up coming in and cleaning up a little bit of a mess for Priester to get the final out in the 6th, and then he threw the 7th as well. He struck out 3 in his inning in the 3rd. Uribe, as you mentioned earlier, came in the 8th. I was looking through the velo. The first couple were 97, and then he sat 98, 99 the rest of the outing. So I think he was fine on the velocity, but a little bit of a shaky inning, and part of it was defense related. Andrew Vaughn had a dropped ball error in that inning that ended up leading to a base runner. So he was able to get through his inning clean with 1 hit and then 2 strikeouts to end the inning. And then Jared Koenig took the 9th. The Brewers scored their runs mostly via first an infield hit from Caleb Durbin, scored the first run. And then Durbin had a normal hit, a single to center field. Bryce Terang also with a sharp single to center field. And then Yelich ended up doubling to left field. That is his 100th RBI, and I don't care much about RBIs as a stat. But again, round numbers, and when you get to triple digits on those types of numbers, like, you had a good season most of the time. It's usually going to line up with a good season. And just, again, kind of nice to see the production showing up. And obviously, you got to have people on base, and the Brewers have had a ton of people on base in front of them. But just generally, I think we're pretty likely, as long as he stays healthy, to see a 30 homer, 100 RBI season from him. He is now up to a 813 OPS, like, just really, really good stuff from Christian Yelich. It's been great to see. It's been very much needed for a team that at times has struggled to have like that go-to bat in the middle of the order throughout the season. And when he's been healthy, except for that very beginning of the season when I think a lot of people were getting pretty upset with him, he's had a very, very strong season overall. And then Andrew Vaughn was able to add on one more with a sac fly to left field. So the Brewers win 5-2, as we mentioned earlier. Ryan, what does that put the magic number at for the division? 4?
4. Yeah, Molitor's number.
All right. Yeah. So, boy, I hope they win the division. That would be a very poor showing at the end of the season if they don't. So things are looking very, very good for the Brewers in terms of not only winning the division, but that magic number starting to get a lot lower as well for home field advantage, or for the bye, I should say. And then potentially that 1 seed. I don't know how the Phillies did today or if they're playing right now. But yeah, I mean, they're just in a very, very good spot. So it's a good place to be in. And again, I think what we talked about earlier with some of these guys, like, you got to keep competing. You got to keep trying to win games and doing everything the right way in that way. But you also need to be down the stretch here. We got to be smart with the rebase, smart with starters, trying to find ways to use. I mean, that could be what Fedde's best usage is the rest of the season, is to help out eating innings through the bullpen, through helping out starters by maybe following up a short start with 2 or 3 innings of his own. But they got to find ways to do that down the stretch here and make sure everybody heads into the playoffs in a good spot. But Ryan, were you looking at the Phillies here?
Yeah, Phillies were off today, it would appear. Yeah, Phillies were off today. They haven't updated it yet, but the Brewers would now be 3 games up on the Phillies, which actually practically comes to 4. So that's just about done there as far as locking up home field advantage throughout the NL playoffs. And I guess the home field advantage for the World Series goes to whoever had the better record, right, in the regular season.
Yep.
And the Blue Jays are currently at 89 wins over there. So they're even a couple games behind the Phillies. So I think the Brewers are almost a lock to have locked up the best record in baseball. We talked a little bit on my other podcast about the idea that maybe that isn't the greatest thing in the world, because the matchup that is coming from this is probably the winner of the Cubs-Padres series would be the team that the Brewers would face in that first round. But you never want to, you don't tank to accomplish matchups. That's stupid. You don't do that sort of thing. You never know how stuff is going to play out. But I guess I just have sort of a visceral reaction to the idea of playing the Cubs in the NLDS. I've been sort of dreading forever the moment when the Brewers finally do play a playoff series against the Cubs. And it feels like we're on a collision course this year, doesn't it?
It certainly does. I'm going to take solace in the Packers just crushing Mike McCarthy with the Cowboys and just assume that's exactly how it's going to go if the Brewers face the Cubs. But yes, no, I mean, it really does feel like we are headed for that, and I am with you. That is something where I'm not sure I'm even going to want to attend games during that series. Like, there's just going to be a lot of things that are going to be like, oh, do I really want to go? And if they lose, deal with Cubs fans. If they win, deal with everything that's going to be happening around. Like, I think it'll be a messy series no matter how it ends up finishing. So I have not been looking forward to that as well. But at the end of it, if the Brewers did win that series, I think it would feel about as good as any non-World Series win could feel. So there is that at the light at the end of the tunnel for that type of matchup. But it is something I would definitely not be enjoying in the moment or even leading up to it at all. But in hindsight, it could be very, very fun to look back at. So I guess we got that going for us if it happens. But yeah, I think that kind of wraps up the week in review. We do have some injuries to discuss quickly. Logan Henderson through his first bullpen session on Wednesday. His move to the 60-day, as we've mentioned in prior weeks, ended his regular season, but the postseason does remain in play for him, and I think they're going to try and prep him to at least be available and be somebody that they could call upon if needed. DL Hall, kind of a similar situation at this point. He threw a 15-pitch bullpen on Tuesday. No issues. It was originally looked at as potentially a late September return. Now the Brewers are estimating early October, which would mean more in the playoffs than actually in the regular season at all. So again, we've talked about that a couple times, but that's tough. Like, you don't have the ability to do rehab assignments because AAA will be done by the time he gets to that point in his progression. So his first outing could be in a big league playoff game off of the injury, and that's always a little scary. Trevor McGill talked about that a little bit because he is still battling through what he's been dealing with the flexor. He reported mild soreness after his last live BP session. So originally it was thought he might be activated for this Angel series. Obviously that didn't happen, and it's not going to happen. He talked a little bit today and kind of mentioned that, like, yeah, I mean, there's no denying it. Like, I would like to pitch in the regular season again. I think that would be important for me to be able to get out there and pitch in a non-playoff game before I return. But that is looking like it's going to be a tight window for that to happen. So we'll have to see where it goes, but hopefully he can get out there and at least get one appearance. I mean, I think that would go a long way. It just sounds like, honestly, hearing him talk, like, for him mentally to go out there. But Ryan, what are your thoughts on McGill there?
Yeah, actually, there's been an update since you put this on the rundown. It looks like they reported tonight that he said he was feeling decent after throwing on flat ground today. He hopes to be back on the mound as soon as September 20th. So that would put it on Saturday. He's hoping to be actually throwing off the mound. And he says he hopes to return. Lots of hopes and decents and words that don't inspire tons of confidence here, but hopes to be back for the final series of the regular season, though nothing is guaranteed. So that is the latest from the Brewers themselves on where Trevor McGill stands.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see where it ends up going. This is going to be interesting. The Brewers would definitely like to have a healthy McGill in their bullpen, but I think a less than healthy McGill could be actually a negative in the bullpen, just given the fact that his fastball does rely on being legitimately like near triple digits for it to be effective. And any tick down and anything like that could really negatively impact him on the mound. So we'll have to see where it goes, but hopefully he can get to a healthy, just a good enough point where he can throw in a regular season game or two and be back in the playoffs. Kind of like what we saw from Nick Mears last year when he returned the last week of the regular season and then ended up looking pretty good when he got his playoff opportunity. The last injury question here, injury note here. Caleb Durbin, if you were watching the game this week, may have noticed on Tuesday night that he had an RBI or he had a hit, and Pat Murphy came out to kind of check on him with the trainer. It was reported later on that he got looked at on Wednesday. He was experiencing some back stiffness, but he was back in the lineup Wednesday. He was back in the lineup today on Thursday. Doesn't seem to be much of a concern, but anytime you hear back stuff kind of thrown around, you got to keep an eye on it. It can flare up quickly, and it can be pretty debilitating when it does get bad. So hopefully nothing like that happens. Durbin's been really, really solid, especially of late. He's been figuring things out again. He's been hitting righties well. Really nice to see. Could be an important piece at the bottom of the order for the Brewers as they head into the playoffs. So hopefully that doesn't turn into anything bigger. But that can take us into our listener questions, and many of these are playoff themed, unsurprisingly, as the Brewers clinched a playoff spot this week, which I don't think we actually mentioned. That's how I feel like we are kind of getting to that point where I'm even like, as the person who constantly says we need to appreciate these moments and all these things, like I just glossed over the fact that the Brewers clinched the playoff spot this week. And if I take you back 17 years, like that would have been one of the best days of my life, the fact that the Brewers clinched the playoff. Definitely not trying to make light of that, but we have a lot more in front of us with the Brewers. And obviously, as we talked about, some of the magic numbers on some of the bigger goals that you can have in a regular season are starting to get closer. And I think those might get a little bit more celebration and attention than just clinching a spot. But I think that's a good thing that the Brewers are at this point where it feels like, okay, nice, we clinched the playoff spot. What's next? Instead of it being kind of the end goal. I think that's obviously what every organization wants to have happen. But moving into these listener questions, this one is kind of playoff related. It's the only one that's not specifically playoff themed in these questions. But Nick asked us about Rhys Hoskins. He said, I know Vaughn and Bowers have been playing well, and it's hard to fit him in the lineup, but Rhys Hoskins has 3 at-bats since coming off of the IL over a week ago. There's got to be more opportunities to play him than that, right? So, Ryan, what are your thoughts on getting Rhys more opportunities? Do you think it's something they should be trying to do in terms of like making sure he's available and ready if they need him in the playoffs, potentially as a pinch hitter, potentially if someone else gets hurt? Kind of like what we talked about with the bullpen. Is this an opportunity to get him some at-bats and make sure he's at least ready to go if needed in the playoffs?
Yeah, I think that there are more chances than this. They could be doing more to get him into the lineup. I suspect he's a guy that is going to see the field right away after they actually do clinch and have their big party. Hopefully that's in St. Louis this weekend. Right now that it's down to 4. There's 18 games left between the Brewers and Cubs, and they need 4 of those outcomes to go their way. Hopefully there's 6 games over the weekend. I would love for them to celebrate in St. Louis's visitor clubhouse. How great would that be to have your playoff party, to douse that room with our Miller Lite and our Milwaukee's Best, as opposed to, their Budweiser and their Busch. I don't even know if that would actually be how that would go, but whatever. I would very much love to see that happen that weekend. This is just a tough one. I mean, I think Hoskins has basically been Wally pipped here. I mean, he got passed by Vaughn, and Bowers offers something that Hoskins doesn't, which is the left-handed aspect and the fact that he's been hitting well. Basically when he got all those chances when Yelich was hurt, Bowers got the chance to play and he took advantage of it. Vaughn has been hitting well in September. The power's disappeared a little bit, but he's been making a lot of good contact and has a very high batting average and taking his walks and all of that. So there hasn't been a home run, but he's been hitting well generally. I think Hoskins is just the third guy, and I think this is why they kept him down for so long. Even Jack talked about this. He was just kept down because they didn't really have a good place for him to play. And this was always where this was headed, was he was going to end up not getting to play that much. I mean, they can do more than what they're doing, but I don't want to do that much more, because I think Vaughn and Bowers are the ones that I really want to ride with when it comes time for the postseason.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think this is, in my opinion, I do think he's a guy you're going to want to have on the playoff roster, because he is somebody who can impact the game with one swing and change the game with one swing. You don't have a ton of those guys on the roster in general. So I think if you're going to plan to have him on the roster, then he needs to get a few more at bats down the stretch of the season here at the end. But I'm with you. Like, it's not something where I would expect many starts. I think you're right that he's probably a guy who gets a start when they do eventually clinch maybe their biggest goals that they have in front of them right now, and they put a bit of a B lineup out there and get some other guys opportunities and get some guys rest. But I think that's probably going to be the extent of the starting for him. I think when you have an opportunity to maybe hit him against a lefty, get him chances to get used to a pinch hit role against lefties, I think you might even have to force that a little bit, maybe in a weird way where it's for somebody that you wouldn't necessarily think is needed to do that. But you maybe just throw him out there and pinch hit him for an Isaac Collins or a Blake, well, probably not a Blake Perkins, but a Joey Ortiz against a lefty or whatever. Like, and it takes an extra sub to make it happen. And normally that wouldn't be how you want to do it. But in this case, I think it's just prepping for the playoffs, and I think you have to find a way to make that work a little bit. But that's probably the extent of it for me. I think it's probably, for me, I'd be trying to get him at bats against lefties in a pinch hit role, because I think if there's going to be something where he comes up in a big spot, that's what it's going to be. So that's really the only thing I would kind of push them to try and do a little bit more. And I think they probably, if I were to guess, I think we'll see some of that down the stretch here from him in these last couple of series. Trent asked us, and this is kind of where we start to get into the playoff questions specifically. He asked, if Joey Ortiz, whose OPS is literally under 400 this month, enters the postseason still hitting like this, is there any chance a very competent Monasterio plays shortstop instead of ending innings? I assume that means in terms of like Joey Ortiz being an auto out and ending an inning whenever he comes up to the plate with 2 outs. I'm guessing that's what he means with that. I'll quickly talk about it, and then I'll let you give your opinion, Ryan. But part of this is, and you mentioned earlier, like, Monasterio offensively has unquestionably been better than Ortiz when he's gotten the opportunity. There's really no doubt about it. He's been basically a league average hitter. Joey Ortiz has not been. And overall, it's much worse than it has been since like mid-May for Ortiz. But even with this slower finish to the season, now it's starting to climb back down, even if you take just those numbers from May 22nd or whatever it is on. But the defense at shortstop is just not something they're going to be willing to forego over the course of full games. Now, bases loaded in the 5th inning of a playoff game, in a spot where the Brewers might be able to impact a game offensively in a big way, could I see them hitting for him? And not with Monasterio there, I don't think. I think that's maybe where you see a Bowers or you see a Rhys Hoskins or whatever. I could see them pinch hitting for him earlier in games and then saying it's worth the rest of the game. I could see them going that way in a spot like that. But I don't think you'll be seeing Monasterio making starts at shortstop in the playoffs. I just don't. I think they're going to trust the defense and want that to play out. I think the only time, like, if you told me during a Freddie Peralta start that they put Monasterio at short to try and go for the offense, I could maybe see that, just because it's so fly ball heavy. Like, maybe they'd go that direction in a start for somebody like that. But I still think you're going to see Ortiz starting. And I understand the question, and I get the frustration with them. But I'll also point to all the seasons the Brewers have made their best runs have been with just very bad offensive shortstops. And frankly, in 2011, it was just a very, very bad shortstop in general. Uni ended up having a great postseason run offensively, so that helped out, obviously. And Arcia also stepped up in the clutch. But I think that's also just kind of what happens sometimes in the playoffs. And a guy like Ortiz, who's shown an ability to hit. He brings the defense to the table. It just wouldn't be that big of a surprise to me if he has a hot couple weeks in the playoffs. And we see what he's given at times this year. He's had good stretches of offense. So I think they'd bet on the defense being important, and then maybe the bat gets going a little bit. And then again, in certain situations, then maybe you pinch hit for him a little earlier than you would in the regular season because you're willing to sacrifice some defense for the chance to have a big inning or something offensively. But I completely lied about keeping that short, Ryan. But what is your thought on this situation, and what do you think when you look at Ortiz versus Monasterio into the playoffs?
I think you hit everything I was going to hit. I can't think of a single thing that I was going to talk about that you didn't already get to. So yeah, we could just go on because I agree down the line. I think that he's a guy that you want Ortiz in there for his defense. It's so important to this club, the defense aspect of this, and Ortiz is so much better defensively than Monasterio is, that it's really, really, really important that he be out there for that. But I could see, especially if they're behind in the middle innings and you have a big situation come up, that they would say, okay, now we're going to pull the trigger. We're going to get a better bat in there. And it probably wouldn't be, you're right. It's probably not Monasterio. It's probably somebody else. And then Monasterio comes in. Maybe they shuffle a little bit or something else, but they probably at that point say, okay, yeah, we'll let Monasterio go there. But yeah, I agree down the line.
All right. Interesting situation has been happening in left field. He said left field has been a bit of a revolving door lately. What should the plan be for the playoffs? He says, I trust Chourio in center. Can't say if the organization agrees. Any chance we see Bowers out there? Sorry, this was a little all over the place. No worries. That's what we do on the podcast the whole time, is I just talk all over the place, so it's fine. I'll answer the Bowers part first. I would be shocked if we see Jake Bowers in left field in a playoff series. I don't think that's going to happen. On the Chourio part, I agree. I trust Chourio in center field. It's not perfect. There are definitely plays that he probably should make that he doesn't. So I get it. Like, I get why people aren't huge fans of him. He's graded out pretty decently in center field on the whole, because he makes some plays that a lot of people can't make, just with his speed and athleticism. And when he does trust his reads, he seems to get to balls that other people aren't going to get to. But he does have some plays that you would definitely say he left out there and you'd like to be seeing made. The other part of this equation is that Isaac Collins' defense in left field has fallen off pretty dramatically. And I can't remember if Jack wrote about this or he tweeted about it, but I know he had something out there, and it just kind of showed the breakdown of the months and how he's been fielding in left field by month. And it's fallen off pretty dramatically since July, where he was like the best left fielder in baseball. A lot of the metrics have kind of been tumbling since then. The reads and the jumps have gone down dramatically in terms of how good they are. So for me, while I do trust Chourio in center field, I think for the most part, I think the standard lineup we're going to see is the one we've seen more recently, and that's Chourio in left and Perkins in center, where they're going to trust Blake Perkins to play really, really good defense. He showed in this Angel series he can do stuff with the bat. He's not just a free out up there, although he kept bunting today during the game, which I don't need to see him bunt every time he's up. He had like 2 bunt for hit attempts with 2 outs. We don't need that, Blake. Just swing the bat. You're capable of hitting. But I think that's the way they're going to lean. And again, I talked about how Fedde on the mound, maybe that's a Monasterio at short day. Maybe Priester on the mound, that's a Chourio in center day, where you have a guy who gets a ton of grounders, and you say, let's get if we feel our best offense involves Collins in left and Chourio in center, then maybe that's what we do on that day. But I think Isaac Collins will play a role in any playoff series, but I'm kind of starting to believe that the starting outfield is going to be more Chourio, Perkins, Frelick than anything else. Ryan, do you have differing thoughts on that, or are you kind of leaning that way too?
Yeah, I'm definitely leaning that way. I could see them making a late inning offensive switch to get Collins in there, but Collins has also not been hitting well this month, or particularly well. 226, 333, 387 coming into play on Thursday. I don't know. Did he have a hit tonight? Can't remember off the top of my head, but
I don't have it up.
Yeah, it's fine. Whatever. The point is that he hasn't been hitting obviously as well as he had
for 4.
Yeah. So he's not a black hole offensively, obviously, but if he's not going to provide the offense or the defense that we had become accustomed to, I think, switching Churio over there, going with Perkins in center field, he made a spectacular defensive play that got them out of what could have been a very big inning in the game on Thursday night tonight. So he was huge in getting them out of that inning. I believe that was the inning Ashby came in for Priester, so that would have been the 5th, right, or the 6th, whatever it was when Ashby came in for Priester. That was the inning that, he made a nice play to get out of that inning. So, I think we're looking at more Churio in left, Perkins in center, Frelick in right, but that's subject to change, and I could see Collins will definitely play a role, like you said.
Yeah. Andrew asked us on the pitching side of things, what pitchers do you have on the NLDS roster, assuming everyone is healthy, like Henderson, Gasser, Quintana, McGill, Hall, etc.? When it's all laid out in front of you, man, there are a lot of question marks on the health side heading into the playoffs. Gasser, I guess, maybe a little different since he is healthy and just needs to be called up to be able to pitch. But Ryan, looking at the NLDS, we've kind of talked about it throughout, so we don't need to lay out the entire thing. But I think maybe just an idea of like the fringe guys that you're looking at, who are you kind of, I don't know if you could take it as an expecting to be on the roster, or you could take it in how you would line up the fringe of the roster for the pitchers. But whichever way you want to take that, kind of how are you looking at it as they go into the NLDS most likely?
Yeah, so I think I have 8 guys. I was playing around with this earlier. I think I have 8 guys who are basically locks for the NLDS, and that would be the 3 starters we're expecting to go there, Freddie, Priester, and Woody. And then in the bullpen, I think Anderson, Mears, Ashby, Koenig, Uribe are all basically locks. Obviously, health pending here, but I think those guys are locks.
Yeah.
So that's 8 guys. And so that leaves theoretically as many as 5 spots open, but I think that's too many. I don't think you need to carry 13 pitchers in that series, particularly. Like, I think that it would almost be borderline on crazy, like overkill. You don't need to do that. But so that think of who that leaves. If those are the guys that I say are locks, that leaves Myers, Patrick, Gasser, Miz, Fedde, McGill, and Hall. Did I miss anybody? All as guys who potentially could be on that roster for as many as 5 spots, because you can carry up to 13. I would lean towards, obviously, if McGill is healthy and looks good, he gets a spot. Like, that's not a question. I think Miz is virtually a lock. I think they'll find a role for him for that series, even if it's like you said, an opener sort of situation. I think they'll find a role for him. The way things have gone with Chad Patrick, I think I want them to find a role. I hope they do find a role. I hope they do go with that, but we'll have to see. So I guess that puts you at 11 guys, and I think 12. I think 11, you could get through that series with 11 pitchers. You absolutely could get through that series with 11 pitchers. You probably could get with 10. But so that might be the 11 there, but that I think still they're probably more likely to go 12 than they are to go 11, I guess. And so that probably leaves a spot for Myers, Gasser, or Fedde. But all of this is subject to change based on what we see over the next few weeks and health and all of that stuff, because and Hall, I didn't even mention Hall in there, but Hall would also be a guy in there. This team is just, we have some real high class problems in terms of our pitching depth. This organization is just ridiculous when it comes to pitching depth. Other organizations just they have to just be looking at us with an incredible amount of envy, because these are the kind of guys that are sitting on the fringes of our roster.
Yeah, these are the number of injuries, and Shelby Miller's out for the season, like that doesn't even count. And you have all these injuries, and these are all guys that you're like, oh man, yeah, I could see him helping in a playoff series. I could see him helping in maybe not a 5-game, but a 7-game, more important, in that type of role. And I really want to see Gasser get a chance. I really want to see how he looks, because I think that's the one that he's shown he can do it at the big league level. He's looked very good since moving to the shorter role in AAA. It's been really, really good for him down there. I want to see how it looks, because I do think, for me, I think there's more upside than a guy like Hall has with Gasser. Obviously, Hall has some playoff experience with the Orioles. Gasser obviously has not had that, so maybe they lean on the guy who has that experience if Hall is healthy, and Gasser's maybe not looked incredible. But for me, just everything else out the window, like I would take Gasser over Hall if I had to choose between the two of them going into something like that. So it'll be an interesting one, but yeah, I'm with you on everything else. Like that's how I would look at it. I think they keep 12 pitchers, 14 position players for the NLDS, and then that might change in the CS if they advance, but I think that's the way they would go about it in that first series, especially just partially because of everything else that the Brewers have dealt with, and the injuries and everything else. I think they might want to have the extra pitcher. That I agree with you. They could get away with 11 and be fine, but just how things have gone this year, I would imagine they might lean towards keeping an extra pitcher just in case they do need someone to eat some innings, even though that's not super common in a 5-game series, like you said. Yeah, I think they'll want to have one long-ish guy, and that's all those names you laid out, and Hall, Gasser, Myers, all those, Fedde, like all of those guys could fit that bill. So I am with you on that. And then the last question we got about the playoffs comes from Patrick, and this is a lineup question. Come postseason, who do you think will bat leadoff between Sal and Terang? Patrick says Sal because he's a quote-unquote gamer and a better profile for the spot. I personally would also lean towards wanting Sal to be the leadoff guy. I think Terang's power has ticked up, and I think there's actually like something where you can put him in the middle of the order and feel pretty decent about him being a run producer. I don't care a ton about lineup order in general. That's never going to be something that I'm too concerned about. The only thing I will say, and I don't think they're going to do this, but I would not move Yelich out of the 3-hole and put him in the 5-hole like they did at one point in the past week or so. I think you keep him in the 3-hole where he's been for a long time. And part of that for me is more just like he's a vet. He's still your best hitter. There's no reason to mess with what he's doing. I don't think it matters a ton, but like I just wouldn't mess with Yelich. So for me, I think I'd put Sal 1 and I'd put Terang 5 if that's where they plan to put the other lefty. But if they went the opposite, it's not going to be something that I'm up in arms about. It's just not something that I can get too worried about or too concerned about in general. But Ryan, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, lineup order is very, very overrated, but I lean the same way that you do here. Get Frelick at the top of the lineup. Bryce with the power, he does have more power than Frelick. Get him a little bit lower. It's fine. Both of those guys you still want hitting towards the top of the lineup because they're both pretty good hitters. So yeah, get them up towards the top of the lineup.
Yeah. That can take us into the minor league sandbox. And Ryan, as is the case whenever you are on, you are free to jump in on any of this. But we got some questions. So speaking of, I mean, this is the same. If you remember the series that they did, the freshman on YouTube, the name we're about to talk about was included with Terang and Frelick and Churio. He hasn't worked out to the same degree that those guys have, but Ben asks, what is next for Tyler Black? So Ryan talked about this on I believe that was the minor league extra for the other podcast that we did, but I think we both kind of agreed on that one that this is it would not be surprising if this is the final week really of his Brewers organizational career and he ends up in a different organization by next season. I think there's just, for everyone involved, it might be best for a change of scenery at this point. And unfortunately for the Brewers, that means you're probably going to be selling low compared to what you would have been in the past. But we've talked about on this podcast and the other in the past, like that is an organizational philosophy that they want to see who works out, and they're okay with once in a while having a guy like Black just not work out. They did it with Weimer. They kind of sold low on Weimer, but they hit on Frelick by doing that, by keeping everybody and making sure that they don't lose the guy that's actually going to be a big leaguer. And maybe there's multiple. We still don't. Jury's kind of still out on Mitchell because the guy just isn't ever on the field, but like it's worked out with Terang holding on to him and giving him opportunities. But with Black, it's just still continues to be really hard to find a spot on the field. The best spot defensively and the place he spent a lot of time this year is left field. But that's not really something that's going to be open for the Brewers anytime soon. And he frankly, he just didn't perform well this year. Like he was not good in AAA this year. He was basically league average at best offensively. So I think it's just a time where the Brewers find some sort of lottery ticket trade for him. Maybe they get a young player in return. Maybe they get like some fringy arm that they find interesting in return. I don't think it's going to be anything big. And I know that people probably won't be happy if and when that trade does happen. But I think that's where we're headed at this point. And I think at least from our conversations, I think you're probably in at least a similar boat.
Yeah, it's time to let him go someplace where he can play and see if he can be a major leaguer. And I don't see him getting that opportunity. There just doesn't seem to be a potential spot for him with the Brewers. And so I think it's time for them to, and yeah, you're right. It's going to be selling low, but sometimes that is a downside. Sometimes you're going to do that when you take the philosophy that they have. And in general, it works so well. You can afford to lose some value on guys once in a while like this. That's fine.
Yeah. I was way off on the packages for these players, but I did call Burns to the Orioles and Williams to the Yankees. I am going to call Tyler Black to the Rockies this offseason. That's going to be my prediction for the offseason. It just feels like such a fit for them and him. And I could see it working pretty well for him there, actually. I could see him performing pretty decently as a Rocky. So that's going to be my call. I have a feeling he's a Rocky this offseason. We'll see, though. I think I've called that in the past as well, and it's not happened. So we'll see.
I'm going to say Tyler Black to the Blue Jays. Send him home to his homeland. Let him go be with his people. But yeah, I actually was also thinking Rockies. I was going to make the joke like, enjoy Mile High, the hitting at Mile High, Tyler Black. But it would definitely be a place where he could get playing time, right? Like that's the thing. Toronto wouldn't necessarily be a place. He'd probably run into some of the problems he's just running into here. Whereas with the Rockies need every bit of help they can get.
Yeah, and it's a place where his like solid launch angles and stuff like that might play up a little bit, where the exit velo is not crazy high, but in a place like Colorado, it might help him a little bit offensively that way too. So could be a good fit for him. I'll be rooting for Black. He seems like a really good guy, and he's definitely put in a lot of work to get better and play a bunch of different positions for the Brewers, but it just hasn't worked out. Patrick, who also asked about Salentring earlier, asked, do you think Luis Lara and or Pratt are on the major league roster this time next year? Both were very impressive in a pitcher-friendly AA with MLB level defense. So, Ryan, we talked a little bit about them on the minor league extra as well, but kind of when you look at those two, do you think there's a chance we see them at some point? I guess by the end of next year, really, is what he's asking, by September of next year. Either of them. I'll let you go first on this one.
Yeah, Pratt especially, I think, has a really good chance, especially if Joey Ortiz continues to struggle offensively the way he has been, very up and down this year. Like, obviously, he's been up and down. So Pratt has the kind of defense that I think they want at shortstop. So that makes him a strong possibility there. He's going to need to hit in AAA, and we'll see how that goes for him. He had kind of a middling season here with the bat, though. This is a Southern League thing. We've talked about that a lot. The Southern League does suppress offense to the point where a very modest line like the one Pratt had ends up actually being pretty solidly above average because the Southern League is just that hard to hit in. Lara seems to be a bit more blocked from this perspective. Looking at, I don't anticipate them sending any of the outfielders that they currently have on the roster out. So I'm not exactly sure where the playing time would come from. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think Isaac Collins or Blake Perkins is out. So maybe he could shuffle up, but Pratt seems to have a little bit more in the way of opportunity, if I had to guess the way things are today.
Yep, I'd agree with that. And we'll talk about both of them in a second when we talk about the Shuckers playoffs, which did unfortunately end today in a 2-0 sweep, but we'll get to that in a second. So I'll leave that for then. But the last question we got on this was from Thomas, who asked us which players need to be added to the 40-man this offseason to avoid being lost. So I'm going to, I will point you to brewerfanatic.com. If you go to the minor league forum, there are going to be two different threads on there. One of them talking about the minor league free agents for this offseason, and one of them talking about the Rule 5 eligible players. I think most people are probably talking about the Rule 5 eligible guys when they bring up this type of stuff. So I'm just going to run through them really quick, and then we can kind of revisit any of the names that stand out to us as people they might actually need to protect. But starting in AAA, and this is all done by Jim Goulart over at Brewer Fanatic. He compiles all of it every year, and it's very, very, very good work, and it's very handy to have. But starting in AAA, you have relief pitchers Will Childers and Brian Fitzpatrick and Blake Holub, and then infielders Ethan Murray and Freddie Zamora. In AA, you have infielder Eric Brown Jr., reliever / starter Brandon Kanar. He's been hurt for a couple of years, so you might not recognize the name. Reliever Nick Merkel, outfielder Hedbert Perez. I'm sure people are very familiar with him and Eric Brown Jr. Nate Peterson, Russ Smith, Garrett Spain. Garrett Spain's an outfielder. Jeremy Vargas is a utility guy. Xavier Warren, another utility, and then Matt Wood at catcher. And then in high A, you have Patricio Aquino, right-handed pitcher, outfielder Luis Castillo, Steven Cruz, right-handed pitcher, Blayberg Diaz is a catcher, Daniel Guiarte is an infielder, Tayden Hall is a first baseman, right-handed pitcher Aiden Maldonado, outfielder Kalen Nicasia, right-handed pitchers Yerlin Rodriguez, Will Rudy, and Cameron Wagoner, who Wagoner's also missed the last 2 full seasons, and Will Rudy missed all of this season. And then in low A, you have Quentin Lowe, Edgardo Ordonez, who's a catcher, lefty Anthony Reyes, and Caden Byer. And then rookie ball, you have Eric Martinez, catcher, Demetrio Nadal, who's an infield and outfielder, and then right-handed pitcher Alexander Vallecillo. For me, from that group, I don't really know that there is one. Brian Fitzpatrick's kind of interesting. Lefty, super tall, decent fastballs, but really good secondaries. Velo picked up a little bit this year from the left side. He made it to AAA. Really bad outing in his first outing, but did pretty well after that. So he's one name that stands out. Childers also has very good stuff, but he also got hit quite a bit in AAA. Other than that, like, if there were to be a surprise, Matt Wood performed extremely well down the stretch in AA this year. And I mean, catchers who can hit a little bit and throw the ball decently, and like, that's a guy that I could see a team taking a shot on. I just don't know that the Brewers would find it worth it to protect him. And then the one name that's way down on the list is Yerlin Rodriguez, and that's a guy who, it kind of gives me like the Miguel Diaz vibes from back in the day, although he's not as young. He's been up to 102 before, and he throws in the upper 90s. He also walked like over a batter an inning this year. So there's a lot that is probably too much for teams to actually want to take that chance. But just given the stuff, I mean, he's probably worth looking at. And I'm not going to name all of the other ones for the minor league free agents, but there are a couple that are probably worth noting. Coleman Crow is a minor league free agent this year. Assuming his injury is not major that he has right now, I think he will be put on the 40-man and protected. That is a guy that I expect to be protected, or I think they're going to put him on the 40-man. That's where I think they're going to go with him. Other names that are kind of worthwhile noting here, Raynel Delgado had a really good finish to the season. Oliver Dunn, I don't think they will put him on the 40, but I would not be surprised if they try and keep him in the organization. There's still a lot of talent there. Eric Haas is now technically a minor league free agent. And then Ernesto Martinez. I think that's the one that he really struggled after he had a thumb injury at one point in the season. Showed a lot of really good stuff early on. I don't know that Bowers will be back. We don't think Hoskins will be back. Vaughn will likely be back, but maybe they keep him around again as that lefty option. But again, I would guess that's more of like a minor league free agent re-signing. And then one other name, well, Luis Urias, I'll mention. They might be interested in keeping him in the organization on a minor league deal, but he's not somebody they will be protecting at any point. And the other name, Alexander Corniel, got called up to AAA recently. He shows pretty solid stuff across the board as a pitcher, but I would still guess he's more someone they try and bring back on a new minor league deal. So, Ryan, I just went through all those names. I think for me, Crow is the only one that I feel confident in saying they will or should protect. But I threw out some other ones that maybe will get looked at as like genuine options. Are there any names that I went through or noted that you think they might protect or would be worthwhile?
Would you kind of already talked about why he's kind of interesting, but probably more to another team than he would be to the Brewers in terms of locking up a 40-man spot for that. This is tough. The Brewers really prize their 40-man spots, and this is a big part of what they do as an organization. They're probably more likely to grab somebody else's minor league free agent and give them a 40-man spot the way they did with Blake Perkins than they are anybody on this list, except for obviously, you're 100% right, Coleman Crow. Like Coleman Crow is, they're going to keep him. He's a legitimate top 20 prospect in the system, and yeah, he needs to be kept, and they will definitely do that. He's also very close, right? Like he is on the verge of the majors. I wouldn't be shocked to see him sometime in the first half next year. Wouldn't surprise me at all if he gets off to a good start.
No, yeah, right, yeah, absolutely. I think he's somebody who could help the team next year, and like you said, pretty early on. But we can move into the last part of this minor league sandbox for this week, and that's just to talk quickly about the Biloxi Shuckers. 2 games. It was really ended up only being a 2-game series in the playoffs here. Game 1, they're playing the Montgomery Biscuits. They lost this one 7-2. Brett Wojciechowski got the start. He looked really good in this one, and the line won't really show that as much, but he went 3 innings. He gave up 3 hits. He only walked 1, struck out 7. Ended up giving up 2 earned runs. So again, that's a 6 ERA over the course of a game, but it just didn't reflect the way he actually pitched. He was up to 100 early in the game in this one. He was touching 100 on his fastball. He did unfortunately leave while warming up for the 4th inning with an injury. So I haven't heard what it is. I don't know what it was. The away announcer said there wasn't anything like noticeable that they were checking on when he came out. So, and he did end up right back in the dugout after quickly going to the clubhouse. So hopefully it's nothing major. He is supposed to pitch in the AFL, so we'll find out pretty quickly if he's healthy enough or not to do that. But the stuff looked very good, and it was nice to see. And him touching triple digits this late in the season, as he set his high mark in innings pitched for the career by quite a bit. That was nice to see too. So we'll see where it goes from here. Hopefully he's healthy for the AFL, like I said, and we get some Statcast to add on him. I really want to see the fastball shapes and stuff like that more consistently. But just seeing that type of velocity, and the breaking balls are good. Like there's good stuff. The fastball just worries me a little bit with the shape. So seeing that velo, maybe even in like the Abner Uribe doesn't have a very good fastball shape, but when you throw 100 and you do it for an inning, it can play. So if Wojciechowski ends up being that type of pitcher instead, and he's a reliever where it's not the greatest shape, but it plays because it's in a small, short stint, and then he's got a good breaking ball or 2 behind it. I think that's maybe the way they head with him moving forward. But Bishop Letson would come in after Mark Manfredi kind of put this game out of reach, unfortunately, with a rough inning pitching wise. Letson came in and did a really solid job. He just turned 21 the day before, one of the youngest pitchers at the level still. He pitched 3 innings. He gave up 2 hits, 2 walks. He struck out 3, and he did allow 1 earned run. He was up to 96 in this one, kind of sitting 96 early in the outing out of the bullpen, sat more 94, 95 after that. But the stuff is very good. The opposing announcer kind of kept jumping on how good the stuff looked from Letson and praising how interesting of an arm he is just watching him for the first time. So really, really talented dude there that for me, my money is second highest ceiling behind Miz in the system. If he can reach it, there's a lot to work with still. And him and Tyson Harden have a good case against each other for it, but those are the two fighting for the highest ceiling, in my opinion, on the pitching side of things. But quickly, Luke Adams in this one ended up going 1 for 1. He hit a homer for his one actual at bat. He walked once and then he got hit twice because Luke Adams can't go a game without getting hit by a pitch, and he did it twice in the playoffs because that's who Luke Adams is. But no, that was kind of the only highlight. Matt Wood also added a homer, who we just talked about. But Ryan, quickly to just kind of talk about Wojciechowski and Letson, and any of you can talk about Adams or Wood as well if you'd like to, but just kind of what have you seen from them? What do you kind of see as like the path forward for them? Let's assume Wojciechowski's healthy heading into the offseason and everything else. But for my money, I think Wojciechowski's a pen guy. Letson's a starter moving forward, but kind of what do you look at for their futures?
Yeah, exactly. Letson is a guy who they seem to do this now in the second round of drafts. They did it with Josh Noth. They did it with Bishop Letson. They tried to do it with the kid who signed to Wake Forest. Why am I blanking on his name? Lavonis. Yeah. Lavonis. And they did it again this year with our other guy from Jersey, our other Jersey guy that they took. It's late. I'm blanking on names right now, but they seem to do. Yes, Chiron. Yes, you got to call Chiron. Yeah, so they seem to do this where they in the second round of drafts now, they're taking these high school kids, usually from cold weather areas, and they are taking a shot on getting an ace with these guys. This is what they've decided to do, how they're kind of approaching the situation. These are where because they feel pretty good about getting guys later who can be something, can potentially do something, but they're grabbing these guys who can potentially be an ace. Oh, and I guess Letson was actually he was 11th round pick.
Yeah.
He
was the day 3 pick.
Letson was the day 3 pick. Sorry, who was I thinking of in that draft? Oh, it's getting late. But anyways,
Message, maybe that's not that draft, but Message might be.
It was not that draft, but another guy in that bucket that fits. Yeah, Letson or the Message. Yeah, like you said. So they're doing this where they are looking at these high school kids that they can really, really develop up and that they really see something in. And it is a very interesting approach because high school pitchers were always the scariest thing, right? Like trying to go after high school pitchers, especially cold weather high school pitchers. I could sing you songs about the Mark Rogers pick in 2005 and how everybody was freaked out about it because he was a high school pitcher who came from Maine and was a cold weather guy. And so everybody flipped out about that. And I guess that would be, Mark Rogers was in 2004, Braun was 05. But yeah, anyway, in that era. But yeah, this is what they're doing, and they are really pushing to try to get their next generation of stud starters from among these high school kids, and it's been very, very interesting to watch. So that's interesting, and you've kind of talked me into this idea that Wojciechowski's probably a bullpen guy, and but could be a really, really good one if everything kind of clicks into place there, and obviously that's real important in the modern game too. So yeah, excited about both of them.
Yeah. So game 2 happened tonight while we were recording. I was watching it somewhat. So if you're watching on YouTube and you see my eyes constantly down, that was probably because I was watching the Shuckers at times. But they ended up losing this one 4-2. Jaron DeBerry got the start and had a very, very solid start. He went 5 2/3 innings. He only gave up 5 hits. He didn't walk anyone, though he did hit one batter. He only struck out 2, but he didn't allow any earned runs. The Shuckers got on the board on a Jesus Mate opposite field solo homer. He almost hit one in game 1. He hit one 105 that only went like at a good launch angle. That only went to like the base of the warning track in right center. And the announcer immediately was like, yeah, you're not hitting one out that direction today. And I was like, oh, of course, because I thought he crushed it off the bat and I thought he had a homer. And it sounds like the wind was just pushing everything in from that direction. But almost 2 home runs in his debut series, playoff series at the AA level. Frankly, I think the one thing I would say is I watched Jackson Chourio debut in Double-A at the end of the season, just like Mate did. Mate looked a lot more comfortable at the level than Chourio did in his first chance. Now that doesn't say anything really, but like it was noteworthy, especially for again a guy who he's 2 months younger than Chourio was at every stop. So that doesn't sound like a huge difference, but it's still he's younger than a guy who was always the youngest at his level, and he looked comfortable at Double-A. Like he's going to start there next year. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And he absolutely looked the part already. And I think he had an error in game one that wasn't a very good play. He made a bad throw, but it was really impressive to see him just hold his own and immediately kind of look the part at that level, which, like I said, Chourio didn't really do when he first got there at the end of the season. He struck out a lot in that stretch, and Mate's whiffed a little bit more and struck out a little bit more at the level, but he looked a lot more comfortable than Chourio did. I guess just a continuation of what we've been hoping to see from him, right, Ryan? I mean, this is it's hard to ask for too much more from a guy like him.
Yeah, the Prince who's promised is what we were talking about on the last Minor League Extra, and it really does seem to be coming together. And I do remember those games with Chourio, how badly he did struggle at that first jump to Double-A in 2022. And then in 2023, he didn't exactly hit the ground running and light the world on fire. That came more in the second half, but it took a decent amount of adjustment there for it. And the fact that Mate already looks comfortable, just it's hard. I'm really trying not to get too excited about Jesus Mate, but it's really, really difficult. And yeah, the kid seems to have the goods. And I think we should all be getting very, very excited about it.
Yes. Yeah. I mentioned we would come back to Lara and Pratt a little bit. They both had some really, really nice defensive plays in this game that was allowing the Shuckers to keep their lead at the time. With a 1-0 lead, Lara made a great diving catch in left center field where he ranged deep into the gap. Not deep into the gap, but it was a shallow ball, but he ran a really long way to get to it, made a diving, stumbling catch where he kind of flipped over himself, and just a really, really impressive catch. For my money, the best defensive outfielder in the system by a lot. And I think probably if he can hit enough, I was actually talking about this earlier with someone, but like that, if he hits enough, I don't think there's any question. He's like a Gold Glove caliber center fielder. Like he's that good of a defender out there. Later on, DeBerry, I mentioned, had 0 earned runs. He came close to having one. There was a double hit to left center. Lara made a perfect play off the wall, gunned it to Pratt, who gunned him out at the plate. Really nice tag from Darian Miller as well to end it. So the defense was showing up early. Blake Burke ended up putting up an RBI single to give them a 2-run lead. And then Will Simpson for the Biscuits has just been destroying the ball for like a while now at the Double-A level. He's been doing it to the Shuckers for all season. He's done it multiple times in the series, and he hit a game-tying 2-run homer late in the game. And then Cooper Pratt did end up making a throwing error to make it 3-2 with 2 outs in the inning. So it would have got them out of the inning. His error extended it and scored a run, and then they added on one more with an RBI single after that. So we talked about how good Pratt's defense has been most of the year, and he's a very, very good defender who I like a lot on the infield. But a tough error there. That's a spot that kind of borderline, that's one of those plays that you can look back on and say, ooh, that kind of cost them a game, or at least an opportunity to win that game. But overall, I think you saw a lot of good things from the Shuckers this year, and playing in a playoff series, a 3-game series, it's like a wild card series. We talk about it all the time. Like things can happen quickly and spiral quickly, and sometimes you don't even play that bad and you lose a game. And I think that's kind of what happened in game 2 here. So unfortunate end of their season, but we saw a ton of good stuff. We saw a nice finish from Mate. Got to go out on top with a homer there, and a finish from a guy like DeBerry for me, who I've been a big fan of and really, really came into his own in Double-A too, was nice to see. So anything else you want to discuss there, Ryan, or are we good to wrap this one up?
No, I think you hit it well. I'm glad you got your DeBerry start, because that guy, you've been talking to me about that guy since before he was drafted by the Brewers. So that is Yeah, that is definitely a trademark Spencer guy right there. So good to see him doing well, and unfortunate that we won't get to see any more of these guys because this ended too soon. This should not have ended this fast. It's frustrating that these series are just that short.
Yeah. And we missed out on a Tyson Harding game 3 start too, which would have been a really nice one to be able to watch as well. So that's unfortunate too. But he at least gets to finish his season without any possibility for ending it on a down note. So a really, really good season from him too. But yeah, I think that can pretty much wrap us up. So thanks again, Ryan, for joining me on light notice, last second. Anything you'd like to plug here? We got to plug Tailgate Podcast. Anything else?
Yeah, listen to the Milwaukee's Tailgate Podcast. We are going to do our 400th episode this weekend. I originally had something else planned for it, but it kind of fell through. We had a lot of people with a lot of busy stuff going on, so it just didn't end up happening. But I'm saving that idea for later. We'll do something a little bit later on with that. But yeah, we're going to be doing our 400th episode. We started in 2017. Also, if you're a Packers fan and want Packers analytic content, my co-host over at the Tailgate, Paul Noonan, him, JR, Matub, Jared Radcliffe from the Journal Sentinel, they do a weekly Packers podcast called Reporting as Eligible. And if you do not listen to that and are looking for a Packers podcast to listen to, that would be the place to go because it's quite good and it covers things the way that this podcast does from sort of an analytical perspective. They hit football from an analytical perspective as well. So if you like this, and like the Packers, you will probably like Reporting as Eligible as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And as the Packers are off to a very good start, and hopefully that will continue going forward, I think that'll be a very fun podcast to listen to this season. I think we're gonna get to enjoy some good Packers football, assuming health and everything else stays the same. Definitely recommend that, and definitely recommend the Tailgate Podcast for everybody. Yeah, you hit 400. I think Jack and I maybe hit the biggest, landmark you can possibly hit last week when we hit our 69th episode, but 400 is cool too. But no, I mean, absolutely go check them out. And 400 is insane. I can't even imagine doing, that's just so many episodes of the podcast, and 70 feels like a ton. So, but yeah, I think that's a great way to end this one. So again, thanks Ryan for coming and everybody for listening. And last thing I'll say quickly, because we don't ever say this, like and subscribe to the pod. Follow us subscribe on YouTube as well to the Brewer Fanatic YouTube page. Like, we should throw that out there a little bit more. Subscribe, do that, like, comment, tell us we suck. I don't care. Just engage. But that's all we got this week. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next